I love to see when there are students and physicians who are interested in training in our specialty, and so welcome. I also want to acknowledge, and one of the reasons for doing all of these Zoom sessions is that this upcoming recruitment season is going to be very challenging, both for applicants and also for programs. Due to the pandemic, it really was our only option to agree on this all virtual format for recruitment this year, really to preserve and maintain safety during the pandemic, also within all of the travel restrictions to get in and out of the US, and really to try to maintain equity of the application process and not try to bias it more towards local candidates or candidates who may be in an area or a region that's not hit as hard as by the pandemic, so that they would be able to travel while other people would have more restrictions. So it really is something that we'll have to make do with this year, and I think we're all trying to make the best of it. And this is one of the ways that we can do that, is really to try to share resources and information virtually to try to prepare for the upcoming season. And obviously we all know that ideally as applicants, you want to visit cities where you may be thinking of relocating for 4 or more years. You want to see what's like inside of a hospital, meet the residents and attendings in person, and really want to get a good feel for the culture and the atmosphere of where you potentially may be working. And so I understand that that's really, that's the main issue this year, is that we can't do that. So, as a program director, I definitely feel the same way. Ideally, I would be meeting my applicants in person and kind of getting to know them and getting a good feel for them and their interests, and kind of seeing, that's the whole thing about the match, is really seeing if somebody seems like a good fit on both ends for a program. And if, I think this season is going to be hard to do all that online. Fortunately, we have, these Zoom connections and, online formats in which we can talk via video, but it's not going to be the same. And I think everybody acknowledges that. So I think, a lot of the challenges for this upcoming recruitment season are amplified for our international medical physicians. Obviously with the postponement and cancellation of the USMLEs, particularly CS, makes it harder to get the Ecfmg certification. And there are pathways now in place, which I'll, give an overview briefly at the end of the program. But I think, a lot of the concern is regarding experience in neurology, and that's from both American trained and internationally trained applicants, having a lot of limitation in in-person patient contact, rotations, and being able to do observerships, particularly for IMGs, getting the US rotations and experience and letters that are typically part of the application process. So I think all that is harder this year. I think also for programs, we're worried about the timeline is different for us. We're not able to look at applications till October 21st, when typically it's the beginning of September. And the information we're going to have is less comprehensive than in previous years for applicants. And there also may be an increased volume of applications per program, given that I know there's definitely some anxiety on the end of, on applicants' part in terms of wanting to find the right program for them, as well as, the decreased cost because there's no travel now. Is that going to result in more widespread applications from our applicants? And those are things that on the program end, when I work with program directors, those are some concerns that are expressed on that end. So I think we're all dealing with significant challenges, and I think the next couple of months we'll need to figure it all out. Fortunately, we have some of our residents and programs now who have done the virtual interview process. For example, Dr. Asad will talk to you a little bit later in terms of his experience applying and matching in vascular neurology fellowship, since that was done virtually in the spring. So we'll touch on that as well. So the other things, just to emphasize, obviously, there have been actions of our current US government that have limited immigration. And we do have, at the same time, a physician shortage in the US. So, internationally trained physicians make up a significant portion of our workforce, including over a third of our neurologists. So we know how important international physicians are to medicine and academia in the U.S. You know, our department at UConn and at Hartford Hospital, really the international trained physicians and the residents who are currently training make up a huge part of our department. And we have an excellent department with a lot of scholarly activity, you know, and we have residents and faculty doing really amazing things in our field. So, you know, it's so important for us to maintain a diverse workforce and to continue the pipeline into neurology, both from US and from international pathways into our programs. So I'm hoping that this session, and that was just sort of, you know, to welcome you, but I hope that this session will provide some information and advice that will help you with the upcoming application cycle. We have a great panel here of some of our faculty and some of our residents. Obviously, we have a lot more faculty and residents, and many of which are IMGs, and I'm very grateful for our participants this morning who are willing to share their advice and share their backgrounds in order to help our applicants for the upcoming season. We'll spend the majority of the session hearing from these panelists, and they'll offer their advice to you. And then after that, I did prepare a few slides just looking at some applicant characteristics, and this is general data. This is not my, you know, my opinions. It'll be some objective data from NRMP and Ecfmg just to kind of review some of that about characteristics of matched applicants in neurology from this past year. And then we can have, if we have time left after that, we can address some of your questions. Hopefully, if you do, you know, this isn't a sales pitch for our program. This is an information session. We will be having a separate open house, which will be a sales pitch for our program in the upcoming weeks, as well as a combined regional one with other New England programs. So you'll be seeing those probably come up on through the social media channels as well. But we'll keep you informed of those, and hopefully you enjoy our program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Schuyler. I think those were some important points, and especially about the fact that there, you know, in diversity is what lies the strength of not only our program, but generally of our field of medicine, specifically neurology. I'll move on to our faculty members, and I'll start with Dr. Mubashir Pervez. All the faculty members will discuss a little bit about their training background and obviously give us some helpful advice. Dr. Pervez, I know you're on service right now, so thank you so much for taking out the time for this. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, this is an outstanding session organized by Dr. Schuyler and Dr. Daniel Assad, which is really important for international medical graduates and helping them understand the challenges everybody's facing is very important these days. So a bit background about myself. I am an international medical graduate. I did my training or school or undergrad and medical school back in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, from Rawalpindi Medical College. I did post-medical training or post-medical school training, like postgraduate training in medicine there in order to get into neurology, but quickly realizing neurology was not well developed there. I wanted to explore more grounds and took the USMLE at that time, and then came over to get into residency. It was a bumpy ride. It is always bumpy with some happinesses and sadnesses because of multiple reasons, because of visas, because of travel, because of not knowing families and friends in US, and also having difficulty getting observerships and externships and researches. But getting into some observerships, it was helpful to build up some of the CV to get into programs like what I did as an intern in Grand Rapids as a transitional year into my neurology residency, which was in Syracuse, New York, upstate. And then the developed interest in intensive care management of neurological patients was developing during those 3 years, which made me pursue my career in neurocritical care, for which I did my fellowship in Houston, in University of Texas. And since then, I've been here for the last 3.5 years in University of Connecticut, and I'm enjoying my time. I'm managing the sick intensive care patients which have neurological diseases. Those patients include bad injuries to the brain in a form of traumatic brain injury, ICHs, big strokes. Moving from my experience to what I recommend being a faculty here and in this challenging era with COVID and not able to come back and forth with a visiting visa to do what we call internships or some kind of observership or experience in neurology to explore how the US system works. I think it is going to be a bit more important how you show your interest in your CV, or how you show your commitment in your CV, in your letters, in your personal statements. And these days with the Zoom coming in, it's going to be a bit more interview, what I say, netiquettes, like how to perform well or how to express all your interests in a short time in a video interview, being in places which is outside US, though I can't promise we don't lose power these days with storms here. Back home, we lose power, so we have to make sure that we use internet facility which is like very reliable, and because that is one, you don't want to miss that interview. That is the important part. And exploring exploring from home, maybe talking to your friends and family, maybe seniors who have got into residency about programs which are friendly, which are in locations better for IMGs, and also working on and getting into those programs by expressing your interest in your CV and your personal statement. That's basically what I have for suggestions right now at the moment, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go further. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pervez. That was some really great advice. One little question I just wanted to ask is if there's any specific thing for Pakistani applicants, since you obviously not only matched in really competitive sort of specialties, and I think a lot of us look at you as somebody that a lot of us want to follow the footsteps of. So any specific advice for Pakistani or South Asian applicants that comes to mind?
The suggestions in the past what I've given is trying to get in to know the US system, how the US system works. It's so totally different. And though Pakistan is like working on those lines now, having electronic systems and everything for medical records and everything. So knowing that how the US system works is important. And that was a bit relatively easy when people were able to travel here. Unfortunately, with this new crisis, that is unfortunate. That you cannot travel back and forth to see and observe and see in person. So maybe talking to your friends and seniors about the programs, how the system works, so that you can relate to it, and that relation will translate into your interviews. Because otherwise, sometimes what happens is that if you don't know the system, you might not be able to express your thoughts in the right manner. So maybe discussing with your seniors how the system works and imagining it will be something which will be very important at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll now move on to Dr. Ajay Tungaturi. Good morning, Dr. Tungaturi. Thank you for taking out the time. The virtual floor is yours. I think, Dr. Tungaturi, we are having some issues with your audio. No, I don't think we can hear you. Yes, I don't think I'm able to hear you. what we can do is, Dr. Tungaturi, I can move on to Dr. Weinstein, and in the meantime, we can figure out about your audio connection. Okay, all right. Good morning, Dr. Weinstein. Yes.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Weinstein. Please go ahead.
Thank you first for the opportunity to be here. I think so I'm from Brazil. When I applied a few years ago, I didn't have, I was the only one applying my class. So I think it was not that common to Brazilians to apply to US, but every year we see more and more Brazilians applying here, and I think it happens everywhere in the world too. We are looking for a better training, and that's what made me come here. So a little bit about me. I graduated from University Federal Fluminense in Rio de Janeiro. And then my last year of med school, I decided that I want to do clerkships in US when I really enjoy and decided to apply for residency here. I did my residency first, my preliminary year in Queens, in New York, in a community hospital associated with Mount Sinai. Queens Hospital Center, and I did my 3 years residency in Stony Brook in Long Island, also in New York. After that, I did my fellowship in neurophysiology at Columbia, and 1 more year in peripheral neuropathy, also at Columbia, when I end up knowing some people already at UConn, and got my interest in and applied for a position here. And I'm here for the last 2 years, yes. I'm really enjoying. So I was told to talk a little bit how to choose a program, what is important, how to apply. So I think now we have to do much more homework once you cannot visit the place. So I suggest really be open-minded. We, as an immigrant, you don't know every program. You always hear about the big names, but in neurology, you're gonna be surprised that a program that you never heard is very well recognized in that area. So look at their website, look which specialties they offer, who are the residents, where do they come from, where did they go, who are they attending. I like to see a lot of diversity, and a lot of Dr. Schuyler said, a lot of our attendees came from different backgrounds. Some did residency here, they went to fellowship somewhere else, they came back, so it means that maybe they enjoy the place. So I think also it's important, you want to be in a friendly environment. When I applied, for me, it was important to be a little bit northeast because I didn't have family here, but I have some friends. So once you don't know, now you won't be able to visit the place. Very, very important to know, to try to figure out the area that you're applying. If you're in a small town, a big city, cost of living is very important. And it's going to be very happy for years, but tough. So you really have to enjoy the place that you live. On your application, I would say English is not our first language for Brazilians, specifically speaking. Have someone review your application. Now we don't even have you're not going to have personal interview. You want your application to be perfect. Have a native speaking, looking at your CV, your personal statement. It needs to be you writing, but you don't want minor mistakes to miss an opportunity. And when you prepare for the interview, prepare with a colleague, talk to people, check the program. Maybe there is someone that you know and you want to send a message, ask to meet this person. I think most of the residents are really friendly, they're open. If you send an email, ask how is the program, how are they, how many hours, if they are happy, if there is any weakness in the program. I think now more than ever that we don't have the residents visiting us, we are gonna be open to receive emails and answer with a lot of proud to the place that we are, and we want people to know where we are and what we are doing and how much we like the place. So I think my advice is like contact people to ask for information.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. That was very sort of helpful advice and some specific advice, especially about getting your application reviewed and how to look and research for programs. I think we have Dr. Tungaturi back, and let's see. Take two, Dr. Tungaturi.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Very good. No, that was on purpose, actually. I was trying to show like what could go wrong when you're actually interviewing.
Yeah, this is good practice for virtual interviews, I guess.
Yeah. So hi, hello everyone. I want to say everyone said what everyone said. Thank Dr. Schuyler and Dr. Assad for doing this. You people probably don't realize how important this is, because when I was applying, I mean, cell phone was itself something that I didn't have. I used to borrow my dad's phone. So forget smartphones. Like there was no contact, there was no information how to apply. Nothing. So we would like go to an internet center to look in like how the programs would like, you know, what are the criteria, what like talking to seniors. And we couldn't even make an international call at the time, right? How expensive it was. But doing this is really great, really great. Again, thank you, Dr. Schuyler, Dr. Assad, for arranging. We couldn't have like never imagined that we would do this in the future, like never, like even like virtual interviews, like forget it, like that was not even on our radar. But I'm glad like everyone else now, like as we are moving forward, everyone is getting more information. Maybe this is good in one way for the IMG applicants, I would say more so, because now they're having a lot of information virtually, which probably would not have happened if there was no coronavirus, I guess. So just going back, my background, I did my medical school in India, and then I decided like it was more like everyone was at the time, like we didn't have enough positions to fill in for postgraduate or residency or neurology. And it's a long, lengthy process, and you don't have a chance or a shot even getting in there. So then we decided to pursue United States here. Initially, I didn't know the process at all, so we thought like maybe what everyone was doing is the right way to do it. Just come in for Masters in Public Health and then try to see if we really fit in, and then start applying for programs. Once I moved in, I came in, and then I see like multiple of my friends, so many of my friends were already here applying already into residency. So then I decided to stop pursuing my public health, and then start preparing for ESMLE. At the same time, I had the luxury of like getting in various observership, externship, and even doing some research that probably helped my application process a lot. But I would second what Dr. Fernanda just said, like once you do your CV and a personal statement, have someone please review it. Even though I wrote my personal statement, I read it back, and then my wife said, like, I don't understand what you're trying to tell. Then we decided to give it to a person, like a professional reviewer, and then they reviewed, and then they totally changed it. Not the concept, like it's my personal story in the personal statement, but made it look presented better so that the person I am presenting it to understands it very well. So that's important. And then when you're applying, also look for when you go into the program website, look for people who are the residents, who are the faculty. Like, does it fit your picture? Like, if you're looking at the pictures, ask a question like, does my picture fit in there? Can I blend in or not? Well, you want to blend in there. You don't want to stand out. Maybe this is one place where you don't want to stand out. Your application already stood out because you already have an interview, but you want to make sure there's enough diversity in the program also, because you are going to deal with a lot of people coming from diverse backgrounds. If you look at your screen, you're seeing different faces from different countries, different backgrounds, different cultures. We may not understand each other very well, but getting into a program with a lot of diversity helps you nurture that, like develop relationship with different people, because ultimately that is your community and that's where you're going to serve. So you want diversity is the key. Second thing, in regards to interviews, we'll see how the tele interviews would go. But one thing I want to say when you're interviewing is just try to be who you are. Like, don't pretend someone, like, just don't pretend that someone who you're not. And also, like, when we apply for programs, you always have 1 or 2 programs that you really want to get in. And automatically, you're subconsciously, you have that enthusiasm and you present yourselves the best. I would say, like, show that to every program, because the program is spending a lot of time spending their time to bring you there and interview you. So show the enthusiasm. When I was interviewing, I thought, like, I mean, people, like the person who is interviewing me knew nothing about India or anything. They would, like, normally ask me about questions about, like, India and, like, in general, like, they want to know you more in person, not just your CV. They already reviewed your CV and everything. You're already there in front of them. Now it's about you. So they want to understand what kind of person you are, what kind of, what can you bring to the program. So never lie. Like, I mean, when I interviewed, I can never forget this. One of where I landed up in the program, attending, asked me all about Hyderabad, where I come from. I could have made up a story because I assumed that he probably knew nothing about it. At the end of the interview, he said, like, I really love this place. I spent 2 months there doing as a visiting professor. So, like, never lie. Like, just show enthusiasm and be there genuinely. I think that's pretty much, I would say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tungaturi. That was again some very insightful sort of information into the whole application process and what we can all do. We'll now move on to my co-residents and talk about a couple of minutes about their background and a little bit of piece of information. So we'll start with Dr. Badiola Lim, our PGY3 resident, and she's going to talk a little bit about how did she research programs to apply to. Katrina.
Hi, everybody. My name's Katrina. I'm currently a PGY4. I graduated St. George's University Medical School. So technically I'm considered an international medical graduate, although most people consider me an American medical graduate. But nevertheless, I still feel like I experienced a lot of the struggles of being considered an IMG and applying for those programs here in the States. Initially, I was born in the Philippines and I moved to the US at a very young age, but I am an American citizen. I'm gonna speak to you guys very briefly about researching programs to apply to, specifically as an IMG. It's well known that a lot of the IMG heavy programs are in the Northeast, meaning specifically the tri-state area and the New England states like Massachusetts, Connecticut. Those programs are very IMG friendly, I should say, and international medical graduates make up a lot of the applicants and the residents. There are a lot of websites now on Google. I was very curious to see how it's changed the past 3 years. So I Googled how to apply for residency as an IMG, and there are so many more websites and so many more blog entries about how to help IMGs apply for residence here in the States. So I thought that was, very promising. A lot of people are reaching out, they're realizing that IMGs are now making a larger number of the workforce here in America. I also saw some states like Texas and Florida, they're starting to take a lot more IMGs as well. I'm sure that you've heard from other residents or other colleagues that Frida website is a really important source to have when researching programs. They have a variable on the top of the Frida website where they indicate how many, the percentage of their residents are IMGs. But I think that the best source is as Dr. Weinstein had mentioned before, is to go to the program website, to go to their list of the current residents, to look at the names of the residents in that program and to see what school they came from. I think that one way, that's a good way of knowing if, you know, what percentage of their program are actual IMGs. And it's also a way to see whether or not that program has somebody from your school or has somebody from your country. I think it makes a big difference when you move here from another country. It's almost like they know a little bit of your background. It makes it easier for the transition that way. Another source that I saw and I considered when I was applying to residency was this website. It's matcharesident.com. I'm not so confident about that because you have to pay for that service, but I have had a few friends who have used that program. So I wanted to throw it out there just in case you guys weren't familiar with it. I don't know if it's a good source or if it's a bad source. I would also try to stay away from those student doctor networks, because when I was applying, it definitely was a source of anxiety for me, especially as an IMG. So really take the time to put in the work, do your research. I know it's difficult during this time of COVID to network, but I think that for me as an applicant, that was what helped me choose which residencies to apply to. I took the time to speak to people in the programs. I took the time to ask them, you know, are there a lot of IMGs in your program? Is there a stigma against IMGs in your program? And most of the time when I spoke to actual residents in the program, I got the answers that I needed. So that's my quick spiel about applying to researching about IMG programs.
Thank you so much, Katrina. I'll now talk a little bit about myself, and then we'll move on to my colleague, Dr. Sudani. So I'm Danial Asad. I'm actually from Pakistan. I did my medical school training there, and then developed an interest in neurology. I moved to the US initially, obviously, in search of clinical experience and getting some research experience. And I just want to mention to everyone that, persistence and hard work does count. So I remember emailing, if I remember correctly, like my Gmail inbox was literally, I think I had more sent emails than I ever received. So I probably emailed around 200 to 300 people asking for like a research position, asking for clinical experience. And eventually some of them replied. I ended up doing some research work at Columbia University and then at Dartmouth University as well, where I had some clinical experience in epilepsy actually. And I was fortunate that I was able to get that, but I am telling you that, there are people who do read your email, and if you're persistent, you can obviously get some kind of clinical experience that way as well. And now I'm a PGY4 and I'm moving to Boston to Massachusetts General Hospital and Brigham and Women's for my vascular neurology fellowship. And hopefully I'll also do an additional year of research fellowship later. My advice, probably one thing I particularly want to talk about, as Dr. Schuyler mentioned, was about virtual interviews. One, actually, I just mentioned that, getting clinical experience, I would email people. I know this is hard now, so I don't know if for this cycle that's a moot point, but for virtual interviews, what I think is very important to remember, and I think Dr. Pervez alluded to this, is to make sure that you have a stable internet connection and somewhat of like a professional background, because this is your chance to sort of talk to them and show them who you are. One encouraging thing that I will tell you is that I did my fellowship interviews virtually, like more than 75% of them, because that's when the COVID pandemic hit. And I did not go to my top program. I knew that where I wanted to go, I had obviously visited it a couple of times before, but programs are picking up and are creating these online resources where you can have a virtual tour. They have lots of videos, informational videos that they're putting up about their program. In terms of virtual interviews, one thing is that I initially was a little apprehensive that this is going to be, somewhat awkward talking to somebody on video rather than in person. Honestly speaking, it is not. As you can probably see in this video sort of conference as well, that with our current sort of Zoom and other sort of applications, you're able to sort of have almost kind of an in-person meeting. The only thing is to make sure that you are cognizant of the etiquette of like a video interview. For that, there is a tip sheet from AAN that is available online, as well as some resources on the AAMC website that you can go for. I'm actually keeping an eye on the questions that we are getting as well, so I'm going to answer them, and we'll attempt to answer them one by one. One question somebody asked was, can you use a research letter of recommendation? I did. And I know that it worked because Dr. Schuyler and the other faculty chose me. So I'm sure you can use that, So the thing is that you can use a research LOR as well. I did end up using, I think, one obviously from my med school dean, and the other two were clinical LORs. One of them, in fact, was an internal medicine rotation clinical LOR. One was neurology and one was, so, people were asking if all of them have to be neurology. It doesn't really matter because obviously very few people expect you to be like, extremely well versed in neurology right before starting residency. So that is something that you can do. The other question which I must answer, I also had a gap after graduating. There was 3 years after graduating that I started my residency. And that is an important question that people ask. If you're doing clinical stuff and if you're doing some other stuff that is interesting, I do think that programs take that into account. So that was another question that people were asking, and I think that can work. But the biggest thing to remember is the virtual interview etiquette, which I think you should definitely review the AAN website and AAMC for those tips. All right, we'll now move on to my colleague, Dr. Sudani. Shivani is our star PGY2 resident, and
That's not
she's
true.
going to give us some she's going to talk to us about how did she time taking her STEP USMLE exams and the Ecfmg certification. Obviously, you can see that on the Ecfmg website. So how about you tell us about how did you time taking your STEP exams, Shivani?
Sure, thank you. Hi guys, my name is Shivani. I'm one of the PGY2s like Daniel mentioned. So basically, I'm going to tell what I did, but basically there are 3 types of candidates, at least in IMGs that I can say. The first one is who already know in their first year of medical school that they want to go to US for residency. In those cases, I would recommend so basically in India, what we have is like we have first 2 years of basic sciences courses in medical school. And after that, in the 3rd year, I would recommend giving taking the step 1 after finishing first 2 years of med school. This is like an ideal candidate, and it wasn't me. Then the step 2, in case of an ideal candidate, the step 2 CK and CS should be done probably. So let me go back. So if it is an ideal candidate, you would take your step 1 after the first 2 years of basic sciences in 3rd year, and then you apply for electives in the 4th year, because sometimes many of the programs require step 1 score to apply for electives. And in the 4th year and in the final year as an internship, what we have to do in India, it's mandatory to get basically our degree. We do not get the degree without completing 1 year of internship. So in the internship period, you can do your electives, give your CS examination, and then after returning, once you've graduated, you would do CK and then apply for residency. But most of the people are like me who did not know in the first year of med school that they want to do USMLE. I decided in about, I think, end of 3rd year or so. Then I studied for the step 1, like end of my final year. I took my step 1 in the beginning of my internship. I applied for electives. At the end of my internship, I went for electives. I did 3 electives in neurology. Then I gave CS examination right away in like 15 days or so, returned, completed my graduation. And then I took CK in the next, I think after 3.5 months or so, and then applied for residency. So this is the second type of candidate. Usually step 1 requires a longer period to basically prepare. Everybody knows that first aid is like the Bible for step 1. But other than first aid, what really helped me was Golgi. It's also called as Golian, Golian for pathology, which is really good. And so basically just take about 6 to 8 months to prepare for step 1, about 3 to 6 months to prepare for step 2 CK, and step 2 CS. If you have some clinical experience, it's a matter of like 15 days or so maximum that you should take. And step 3, I would recommend to do it while you're interviewing, but obviously in this case, when we have the pandemic here and nobody's doing any, like we're going to be virtual this year. So try and take your step 3 before starting your residency, because intern year is no joke. And other than that, this is the second type of candidate, which is, I think, the most common, and most of my colleagues and my medical school friends who did apply for it was this in the second category. Then the third one is who've already completed either residency, who've already graduated. In those cases, while if you're working in the hospital, I mean, during that, you can just give 6 months to step 1 and just take step 1, step 2 CK, and step 2 CS. And just for basically, I belong to a medical school. I was one of the people like in the first batch of my medical school to actually apply to USMLE. And I was lucky enough that Dr. Schuyler picked me. Gave me this opportunity to be here, and just hard work is the key to everything, and just don't lose hope. Other than that, it's just, yeah, that's really it. Sorry.
No, thank you, Shivani. That was great. People are actually asking about step 1 cutoff scores, and now that it is a pass or a fail. I think Dr. Schuyler did post about it on some sort of social media platforms, and I think AN platforms as well, that remember that applications are looked at holistically. So in terms of any cutoff scores for step 2 now, or any of that, really, is one of the factors, but it is not, something that will turn out to be a deciding one. So just please remember that, and I'll answer the other questions as other of our great PGY2 residents, Ahmed Al-Mashad, who is also a fantastic football or soccer, whatever you call that player. So yeah, go ahead, Ahmed.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Schuyler and Dr. Asad, for this interesting session. I'm going to talk briefly about myself first. I don't know if everybody can hear me well.
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Ahmed Al-Mashad. I'm from Egypt. I finished my med school in 2017 from Ain Shams University, and then I decided in my last 2 years that I want to come to the United States. So after graduation in 2017, I did like 6 months of clinical experience here, and then I started my research in Washington, DC. So I'm gonna talk briefly today about like how to find a research position and what's the importance of getting research and residency or in applying for residency. So first of all, we have to agree that doing research is not essential to match into residency. And I have like a lot of colleagues in my program who didn't do like that much research before the beginning. However, it's a very good thing to do like in your CV while you're applying for residency. So the advantage of doing research is like the first thing that can help you getting more familiar with the healthcare system over here, and be more familiar with the electronic medical records. And this is a very important thing, especially like in your internship when you start. You don't have a lot of experience and dealing with pre-charting on patients, and this definitely will help you. So the other thing that you will definitely get more interviews if you do if you do some research experience here. Finally, if you are able to get some publication before you apply for residency, it's going to be very valuable thing in your CV. So the next question is that like how to find a research position. So you have to determine your area of interest first. Like if you want to do neurology, it's better to do research in neurology. It's like it's a common thing, but it's like if you do research in any other area, it wouldn't hurt. But like doing research in the area that you're interested in is very valuable in your CV. If you decide to do neurology, try to find the area in neurology that you're interested in. It's not important. Like I did research in epilepsy, but I ended up like getting more interested in vascular neurology. However, doing research in the certain area that you like is going to be more fun and more interesting. So you have to find the attendings who are publishing a lot. It doesn't matter what these attendings are. The thing that matters is that like they have to publish and they have to have more research and clinical trials so they can involve you. So try to look, like, for example, get wherever university that you're interested in and look at the attendings who are publishing a lot and contact them. Try not to contact everybody, because like sometimes you keep sending emails like to every attending in the department, and you're gonna lose your time, because like a lot of attendings are not that involved in research and they don't have like they can like sponsor you, especially like if you're on a visa. So you have to put in consideration that it's going to be very tricky and very challenging to find a paid position. You have to prepare yourself that you're gonna sponsor yourself, especially like maybe in the first 6 to 8 months until they can pay you after that. So so the last message I want to give is that based on my experience doing a clinical rotation in the United States is more important than doing research. Research is an additional thing. If you have the chance to do it, it's great. It will improve your application for residency. And feel free to email me if you have any questions, or I'm happy to answer anytime. Thanks everybody for listening to this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you. One thing I just want to mention is that obviously we understand that getting clinical experience during this COVID-19 pandemic is is hard. People are asking if local sort of from their home country, if they get recommendation letters in that particular field, will that help as well or not? In our program, I will tell you what happens is that since we have such a diverse faculty, I know that happens in the Dr. Pervez, Dr. Tungaturi, and Dr. Vansen. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that sometimes when we get letters from other sort of countries, we have enough people from different regions to kind of see where that medical school is or who those people are, and somebody does know people in that field. So you can use those letters as well, and obviously everybody understands that this year, if you could not do clinical experience because of the pandemic, that shouldn't be held against you. But of course, doing like a neurology rotation in your home countries will definitely show your your interest in that. For instance, like I know Dr. Pervez and I, like we know people or med schools in Pakistan where we can kind of comment on that, and I'm sure that holds true for other countries as well. We'll now move on to Dr. Pire Ansari. Pire is our PGY3 resident. And Pire, I would just like you to comment, obviously tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you can let us know how you ranked programs. And now with virtual interviews, what recommendations do you have? I can comment that too. Just to let you know, Pire is post-call, but you can see that she's always eager to participate, and she just did her night shift and she's about to leave. But thank you so much for joining us, Pire.
Thanks, Danielle. So yeah, my name is Pire. I'm one of the third-year neuro residents here at UConn, and I actually am from Toronto, Canada. So I'm an IMG from Canada. I did my undergrad at the University of Toronto, where I majored in neuroscience, and then I went to St. George's Medical School, like Katrina, and actually did my clinical rotations in New York City. So that might be a little bit of a different situation was fortunate enough to be able to get that clinical experience here, but still had still classified as an IMG. So my job is to talk to you about ranking programs, which is probably not the first thing on your mind right now. I think you're more focused on getting the interviews, but it is probably one of the most important parts of this entire process. At this point, you've done all you can to impress everyone, and now the ball is in your court. I think for everyone, this process will be a little bit different. I think as an IMG, geography is a big part of the decision for a lot of the American grads. It makes sense, they have geographical ties, but as an IMG coming from a different country, you could pretty much go anywhere. So you don't have that limitation, which is a good thing. So geography is a big part of it. What type of weather do you like? Do you want to live in a big city, or do you want a quieter lifestyle? You have to think about these factors. So that's one thing I would think about. The other thing is really, this was the most important thing for me, is just the type of people that you're going to work with, the residents that are at the program, the faculty that are at the program. Do you feel like you would be a good fit in the program? I think that was for me the most important factor in my decision. You will get a feel for this when you go for your interviews, when you speak to the faculty, to your interviewers. It might be a little bit different this year with getting to know the residents. I think the way you can kind of optimize that is just to do your research. So definitely go on the website, go on social media. There's a lot of information this year that programs will be putting out on social media, so that you can get to know their residents a bit more, their interests, their hobbies, where they're from. Look at their pictures, see if it's a diverse group of people, if that's important to you. You can look at male to female ratios as well, if that's important to you. I like having both female and male role models to look up to, so that was important for me. And of course you might be thinking about does the program have good research opportunities? Where do their graduates go for fellowship? Do they go to a diverse there's their diversity in the fellowships that they go into? All of that information will be available to you on their website, and these are also good questions to ask during your interviews. So definitely, keep that in mind. I know this is kind of, not at the front of your mind right now, but just keep that in, the thought there, and ask these questions during your interview time. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Pere. Thank you. We'll now move on to our sort of recently matched PGY1 residents, Aisha and Afifi. Dr. Aisha Siddiqa and Dr. Afifi are now doing their intern year, but I'm sure they're on an elective rotation, looking from how happy they look. All right, we'll start with Dr. Siddiqa. Aisha, if you can comment on about getting neurology experience, and we will comment more on if you couldn't get the experience with Dr. Schuyler as well, as I mentioned. Go ahead, Aisha.
Hi, everyone. It's Aisha. So I graduated from St. George's University. So as for clinical experience, I know it's hard for all IMGs to get good clinical experience because they don't have a lot of rotation sites. So for me, I actually reached out to programs, that was out of the network, emailed them, really pestered them a lot to give me a rotation elective, and ask them if they have any opportunities for, out of network students. So that's how I gained my experience from North Shore University Hospital in New York. And I also did another community hospital rotation in Brooklyn as well. So to answer your questions about whether it's important to get experience from academic centers versus community centers, honestly, for experience, yes, it's better to get rotation at academic centers because you see more patients, more volume. That's good for you. But for application purposes, the more experience you have, even if you are doing medicine rotation per se, you can always seek out those neurological cases. You can always, because I did, for my other rotations, when I did my rotation in medicine, when I did my rotation in the ED, I always seeked out those neurological cases, the stroke cases, whatever interested me more. So you can always do that just to show that you were really interested in this field, and so you can talk about it in your application, you can talk about it during your interviews. So you don't really have to have letter of recommendations from a neurologist or, have to have those academic big center LORs or even experiences, okay? You can always get experiences from community hospitals, outpatient clinics, and just get letters from those places, from those attendings. And I know right now it's very difficult for us to get any experience at all in the US maybe. So I would recommend, seeking, getting experience in your local community patient clinics, wherever you are, your hometown, home country, because it's really matters, if you can show some interest and getting experience wherever you can. It's very important to have that. Okay, and whatever other questions you guys have, you can always reach out.
Thank you so much, Aisha. All right, we will now move on to Dr. Mohammed Afifi. Afifi, if you can obviously tell us a little bit about your background and maybe also comment on a question that I think we should also answer is ranking categorical versus prelim programs. I know Dr. Tungaturi answered in the chat, but what did you do last year?
So my name is Mohammed Afifi. I graduated from Tanta University back in Egypt. I did a little bit of some clinical experience back home. Then I moved to the US about a year ago in epilepsy. And then I remember everything about the match. It's a tough process. I remember also about the ranking process. For me, I felt that I would be more secured if I applied mainly to categorical programs and ranking categorical programs before prelim. All my interviews were from categorical programs, so I ranked those, of course, first. In the event that if I had, I think what I would have done in the event if I had prelim interviews and prelim programs to rank, I would have ranked them after the categorical program. It's completely up to you. Just keep in mind that if you rank a prelim like an advanced program, you have to rank a prelim program as well, like next to it, because if you match in an advanced program but don't match in a prelim program, then you basically didn't match. So that's why we all say that categorical programs are more secure than an advanced program, and it's all up to your favorites. So if you have a very good advanced program that you would like to match into, I would say go to it, like do everything you can to match into this program. Just make sure that also you secure a prelim program and you rank your list according to that. So I think I was supposed to talk about moving into the US. It's a tough experience, actually. One of the things that I really like about the research, doing the research experience or clinical US clinical experience here is that it prepares you for something like that. If you're coming from a different culture or different, if you lived in a small city and coming to a big city here in the US, it's gonna be completely different. So doing some sort of experience before in the US prepare you even for like life in the US outside of the hospital. I I think the most important thing to focus on is preparation, a lot of preparation. Everything is better with a lot of preparation. So prepare for moving into the US. As soon as you hear about matching, start thinking about how start thinking about how are you going to secure an apartment, how are you going to furnish that apartment. It really helps out that if you have a friend. Also, don't be shy of emailing their residents and asking, these are going to be your colleagues, so email them, ask them about, asking them for help, where do they live, like stuff like that. And I'm sure everyone will be more than happy to help you with something like that. The other most important thing that I think will be important for anyone who's moving into the US is getting a driving license, and this is very, very important. I think it's right now I don't have a driving license, so it's very difficult for me moving around. So I would say try having a driving license in your home country. That's very helpful because that will help you getting a driving license here fast. Apply for this as early as possible. Like there's a writing test, then there's the behind the wheel test, and the waiting times are long. So as soon as you also hear about the match, if you don't have a driving license, go online and go to the DMV's website for that state and start applying for those tests, because it takes time until you find a slot opening, an opening slot for the exam. One last thing, I guess, is try to get as early as possible before the start of the program. It takes time, like finding the apartment, as I said, or furnishing it, or getting a, or if you have a driving license, getting a car. All these stuff takes time. For me, it was different, because of the whole COVID situation. Week of June, so it was very tough. I had to act fast. I had a lot of help from my friends here in the program. That's very fortunate for me. But I think if you don't have that, or even if you have, I think the best thing would be to come here as soon as early as possible, to be able to prepare your apartment, your car, your driving license, all of that stuff, and get a feel of the city as well. I hope everyone gets a taste of the excitement and the nuance of moving into a new city.
Yeah, thank you so much, Afifi. We'll now be answering the questions that are in the chat. I'll start with one question, which I think an overwhelming majority have been asking, and I'll first direct it to Dr. Pervez and the other faculty members, and Dr. Schuyler in the end. There'll be some FAQs that I'll, if you could answer those, because I think you'll be the most pertinent person. But starting with Dr. Pervez. Dr. Pervez, can you comment a little bit on the LORs? And there's a question about home country LORs, which a lot of people are asking. And what is a personalized LOR versus a kind of a templated LOR? And when you are reviewing it as one of the faculty members, what are you looking at?
Right. So we totally understand that these days it's going to be very difficult to get US based LORs if you haven't done electives during your medical school or before this pandemic. And if this time was the time when you were supposed to come to do research, there were some questions about that as well, that you had positions for research and you couldn't come. So we would understand that you were not able to get the letters. So home country LORs would be adequate. The important thing about LORs is, one, the waived LOR is better than when you submitted it. I don't know, the time might have changed it.
That is correct.
Yes. Right. So waived is always considered to be a better LOR or more authentic LOR. One. Two is what is written in the LOR. Personalized basically technically means how much detailed is written about you. We write LORs and then it could be just, if I don't like a resident, which never happens, we can just write a small letter with usual language. Okay, hardworking, please call me if there's a question. But a personalized LOR would be detailed about the resident or a student, about why he's better, why is he different, which number you will call me. You can call me at this number if you have a question, and do a hand signature or a hand written on top of the printed LOR. I've seen LORs, I've written LORs for that purpose, that you handwrite about that person on top of your printed one. sometimes that helps. Dr. Schuyler can also put light on it as well. That puts a different impression on the person reading it. And how much detail, like it all comes from how much hard work you have put in that rotation. So try to be more involved in those rotations back home as well, so that the LORs are more detailed. And then obviously we'll see that as we read them. And as Daniel mentioned as well, that we know enough people back home as well, that we know that who's writing it. So that does make a difference when I'm reviewing applications coming from Pakistan, at least.
Thank you. Now, I think what I'll do is I'll quickly go over some questions. Dr. Schuyler, I would want if you could answer some of these, because I think they'll be more pertinent to you, since you review most of the application, as in all of the applications. So number one is, a lot of people are asking about date of graduation up till the application cycle. If there's a gap, is there a strict cutoff after which you do not review applications, and what do you look for in the interim after graduation and then residency start date?
Sure. So I can only answer for me personally. Yeah. I can't answer for other programs, obviously. I've been doing this a long time, and I actually really enjoy reviewing all your applications. I do read personal statements. I do look at everybody's CV. When I'm looking at the application, when we say holistic, I mean, that word's thrown around a little bit, but what that means is that there really isn't a cutoff. So the idea is that, I'm not, obviously there are some applications, if somebody has failed each of their step exams 5 times, then I would worry about that person's ability to pass boards. And obviously that's a really high stakes outcome for residency programs. So just the issue of the board scores, I think once they're above a certain, and I'm okay with step 1 going pass fail. I know it's like one less piece of objective information, but the idea is that I want to make sure the resident is able to absorb that volume of medical knowledge needed to learn the specialty material within neurology, to be a general neurologist, and also that I'm confident that they will pass their boards. And what is the highest indicator of board pass is previous high scores on other standardized tests. I mean, I think once someone has shown that they have the ability to pass standardized tests on a regular basis, we keep doing it, and that's our method of licensing. So that's really what I'm looking for. I'm not really grading or giving points necessarily for, if you score a 250, you get this many points. If you score 255, you get more points than that. I think above a certain, once you're at least scoring in the average range, we know that you're going to pass your boards. So then the scores become less important in reviewing the application, if that makes sense. So it's really not about the absolute number on, on a specific test that I'm looking at. And in terms of if there's a low score, it depends on the circumstance, really. So when I'm looking at test scores, if somebody is scored below the 5th percentile, let's say, on step 1, step 2, and step 3, that's concerning to me. If somebody has a relatively low step 1 score, but then let's say their step 2 and their step 3 are both, 90th percentile or something like that, then I'm not going to worry as much about their step 1 score. So I think, I get a lot of questions about, well, what's your cutoff for step 1? And it's not really, there's not really an easy answer to that. It's really sort of more of a big picture. So I just wanted to explain that just in terms of looking at your scores. In terms of the clinical experience, because I know that that's, on everybody's mind, as program directors, we're trying to figure out which applicants are going to do well in our clinical training programs. So in looking at the applications, all things being equal in terms of medical school performance, test scores, if all of those look fine, then how do I tell which resident is going to perform better in the clinical setting? So I'm looking for physicians that are going to be, good general neurologists when they finish, right? So I want to, make sure that I'm picking people who are going to work well with patients, are going to work well within the clinical environment and with the interdisciplinary clinical teams, and really have a desire to practice evidence-based medicine, right? So I'm kind of looking to see in the applications some previous documentation that you have strong clinical skills, that you have good communication skills, and those are really important. So it's hard for a program to really assess an applicant in those regards, so based on a CV that's mostly research based. So obviously doing research, I think, shows that you have scientific curiosity, writing skills, you know, if you've published papers, things like that, that's great too. But just in terms of trying to tell who will be, you know, a good physician that patients connect to, and, you know, these are our docs that are, you know, going down to the stroke codes and taking care of critically ill patients and patients in status and patients having seizures and patients presenting with their families for Alzheimer's. You know, we're looking for clinicians that are going to succeed in that environment. So, you know, so try to picture, you know, like if, you know, picture being a program director, what would you be looking for? So I think looking at, you know, when I'm looking at your letters, yeah, I think if you've done a lot of research, or, you know, especially if you have an advanced degree and you have a research mentor who you've worked closely with, who knows you well, who knows that you're a diligent, hard worker, and are, you know, have really learned a lot in their lab or however, I think that's great to get a letter from them. I think that really does add to your application. But I think the most important letters are really the letters that speak to your clinical skills. And it doesn't necessarily matter that they're all in neurology. It definitely doesn't, especially this year. But if you have some preceptors or attendings or faculty that you've worked with that can really speak to strong clinical skills and communication skills, I think that will carry more weight than having a short, brief letter that has the name of somebody on the letterhead that we all may have heard of. You know, I think that won't necessarily provide as much information. So I think, like what Dr. Pervez said, the more information that can be communicated about your, you know, how you are personally in terms of how you would be as a resident is really the most, sort of the most important when we're reading the letters. And if I read a letter that, you know, there's so many letters that I read. So if I get a letter that's really, you know, the most outstanding letters that I read are ones that are really talking about the applicant's personal characteristics and their values and their character. You know, those are the types of letters that are the ones that really, really make me feel good about an applicant and really want to meet them. So the same thing with a personal statement. I don't think it's required that you necessarily need to share a traumatic experience or, you know, something that you may not want to talk about in the interview. I think that, you know, you don't necessarily need to, you know, it's up to you what, you know, what it has inspired you or what inspired your passion in this profession. But I think it's interesting. And what I want to see is really, you know, a statement that lets me get to know you a little bit and sort of understand your, you know, sort of where you're coming from and why you're interested in my program or why you're interested in this specialty in general. So I think, you know, just kind of have in mind your audience when you're doing your application. So your audience is, you know, our neurologists who are program faculty and program directors. And so, you know, kind of think about, you know, what we may be looking for in that regard. So the other things, just from the questions, because you guys have great questions. So
yeah,
I
about
think,
the clinical gaps, Dr. Schuyler, about
yeah,
like
so
the gaps
clinical
since
gaps,
graduation. Yep.
So it's not about a cutoff from your medical school graduation date, and I think that it's also the same thing like when I talked about the score cutoffs. So if it depends what you've been doing. So we do have several of our residents currently and in the recent past who actually completed neurology residency in their home country and then came and trained in our program. And they're basically, you know, they're like neurology attendings when they start. I mean, so we've had a few people who, if you look at their graduation date, they've done potentially residency and fellowship in their home country before they start. And so their graduation date from medical school is probably going to be 5 years back. And that's not something that would, you know, we wouldn't eliminate their application. But it really depends on what that time has been spent doing. You know, if there's a year or two when there's not as much clinical activity going on, I think that's okay. But once you get more towards, you know, 4 or 5 years or more absent clinical activity, I think that's when we worry about having a tough transition back to being a medicine intern. Because when you start residency, you're going to be in internal medicine intern rotations for the majority of the year. And I think it's, that's something that's very challenging anyway. And so that's where the concern lies if there's a long period of time without active clinical activity. So, but there's not really a set cutoff. It really depends on, what you've been doing in that time. But certainly if you've been in a residency training program or you're doing active clinical work, that, that's what we're looking for as well. And I see this, there's a couple other questions, I'm just skimming them. I think, and there's actually one about a US address. So I hate to say this, but I think it is, it is helpful if you have a US address when you're interviewing. I think, I'll tell you why for our program here, and it probably doesn't matter as much this year, but honestly, there is somewhat of an assumption. I think that if you have an address that's very close by, so if you're in the tri-state area, that's where, just statistically speaking, many of our applicants who we've matched are from the tri-state area. Right now, we do have we have a resident from Alaska, in terms of, and that's as far away from in the US as you can get from Connecticut. But usually what we've done in the past is that helps with our wait list. And that's not a factor this year in terms of virtual interviews, but just in past years, there's so much sort of like cancellations and rearranging of interviews that we maintain a local wait list. And so that, and the way we put people on that list is if they're within an hour or two's drive, and that's for traveling for interviews, we've always kept a list of strong waitlist candidates who potentially can be contacted if we get cancellations within a week of the interviews. I guess that doesn't matter as much this year, but that was one reason why I think it would be beneficial to have sort of a more local address.
Awesome. Dr. Schuyler, I was just thinking that one thing we'll do is that we'll go on to the presentation that you prepared, which I think has a lot of useful information. One thing I just wanted to comment on, and I think you also commented it on one of the AN forums as well, was that 5 out of 7 of our graduates, of our applicants this year from Afifi and Aisha's class were IMGs who required J1 sponsorship, and all of them ended up making here in time. In fact, I also matched in the year when we had the first time sort of some travel restrictions from the administration. And I was obviously very, very worried. Right after I stopped interviewing, there were some travel restrictions. Thankfully, not from my region, but generally there was a lot of uncertainty and ambivalence as to what will happen. But clearly, if you get there is a lot of adequate support, I do think, not only from programs generally in getting you the required documents, but also from Ecfmg to make sure that you're like a exchange visiting scholar and physician. So Dr. Schuyler, I'll just share your presentation.
Sure.
And I think this will answer a lot of questions for people and give us some objective data. What I can do is, Dr. Schuyler, if you go ahead, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen. So I just wanted to direct you. I just took a couple pages out of the NRMP 2020 match statistics. So this is something that's available to any of you to look up online, and they sort it by specialty. But just, I think this first slide right here is probably going to be useful to our both our US and non-US IMG applicants, just to show just sort of the characteristics of our applicant pool, and the characteristics of applicants who matched this past year. And this is for just this recent match. And it shows the characteristics just in terms of mean scores, and just taking from the ARAS CV, the number of different experiences in the different categories that match versus unmatched candidates tended to have. So, and then I just copied and pasted the slides, but you can, obviously I don't want to spend a lot of time on all of them, but it basically the characteristics are pretty similar in terms of US versus non-US IMG applicants, in terms of scores and overall application characteristics. So if you can go ahead to the next one, actually the one with the graphs, that one right there.
Yeah.
So I think there were some people asking about how many programs should they apply to. Mm-hmm. And I think the trend is generally that people are over applying. So just in terms of the number of programs applicants need to list in their rank list in order to match, it looks like you get close to 100% once you get up to 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. So I think, and this is for IMGs. So in terms of our applicants that are matching, I would say somewhere in terms of your rank list, I would say somewhere, I think once you get up past 12, the curve kind of levels off. So if you're, it depends how many interviews you have too. So I guess, but I think that's useful to see. I know that the average number of programs applicants are applying to has gone up, I think, above 20 at this point. And potentially some people are applying to more than 30 programs. It gets very expensive. And I think if you have the characteristics that kind of match that of applicants who are matching, then I don't think you necessarily need to be ranking 30. It's probably closer to 15.
And I think this would be a good last slide that you brought in. I think it's very helpful for additional resources.
Because it's almost 9. But just in terms of the Ecfmg, I definitely, probably you're familiar with their resources and their website, but in terms of the alternate pathway for Ecfmg certification, they have finalized that, and they are providing alternative pathways to CS in order to get Ecfmg certification. And so I think that, this is the alternative to it. And that's just what we're going to go with. I think as long as the applicants are able to meet the criteria, it's going to be considered equivalent to having passed CS. So that's what I wanted to mention with that slide. And then the last slide, I just put that in there just to mention the on-time arrival rate, which ended up being very good. So this is from July. So we were really worried this year in our program and everybody else who are, in terms of our J1 visas, we were worried that we weren't going to have people get here or have their visa processed in time. And fortunately, everything worked out. So all 5 of our interns who needed a J1 were all able to arrive. We did have to have people quarantine for 14 days, and that's that's a mandate actually for anybody, not just coming from outside the US. Anyone who's coming to Connecticut right now from, I think, 33 states has to quarantine for 14 days coming into Connecticut. So, but we were able to get everybody started by the middle of July. So that was really exciting, and everybody's off and running. So
perfect. So I think we have a couple of minutes left. I just really wanted to thank Dr. Schuyler, Dr. Pervez, Dr. Weinstein, Dr. Tungaturi, and my fellow residents for taking out the time. I think this is a very, very important topic, and I just wanted to tell all the applicants, wish them the best of luck, and congratulate them on choosing, I think, in our opinion, which is probably the best field in medicine. And I really hope this was helpful. Please go to all the websites that we mentioned, including Ecfmg, AAN, AAMC. Feel free to visit our program's website as well. We are grateful that so many of you joined, and I hope the information was helpful. I would particularly like to thank the faculty members. I know all of you have busy schedules, and I'd like to thank Dr. Schuyler for championing this cause, not only in our program, but also nationally. So thank you so much, and thank you. And now we will hopefully keep you guys, in the loop for the residency sort of interviews, and hope to see some of you during the residency interview trail. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Take care.
Good luck to everybody.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us.
Good luck. Thank you.